We continue our Across Africa report with Arise News contributor Frankie Edozien. Hey, Frankie.
Hey, Debbie. Good evening.
Good to see you. Hey. Well, okay, so our first story is not such good news, and that is a new case now of Ebola has been seen in Mali.
Yes, and this is it's very concerning to many people because this particular person was a 2-year-old child, and she was actually in Guinea where her parents died of Ebola, and her grandmother was taking her back to Mali. So they had traveled over 600 miles, but she had shown symptoms already: coughing, nose bleeding, vomiting, soiling her clothes. But the test actually came back positive once she arrived in Mali, making that Mali's first case. So now the Malian government, which for 10 months has been dreading that this would come over their borders, now had begun their contact tracing, and they're tracing about 11 people. But the difference between this particular case and what we had in New York with a doctor was that this child, while traveling, was already symptomatic. So we're not sure how many other people who came in contact with her nosebleeds on the buses, because they traveled by bus 600 miles, and all the rest stops, how many people came in contact with this child, picked this child up, touched a little bit of mucor. So it's very, very worrying to so many people that this one particular child could possibly have transmitted the virus to so many people that they may not be able to trace, because they don't know all those people
and that's
on
very,
all the
very
buses,
disturbing.
all the rest stops and all of that. But right now, Mali is in a state where they have the first Ebola case, that the person has died, the grandmother has been quarantined, and they're tracing 11 members of the families.
Any indication of how equipped Mali is to handle this? They've been in a civil war for quite some time, and a lot of destruction going on there.
They have had a lot of problems in Mali. Well, one of the things that they've done over the last couple of months was watch and see what people have been doing. So they don't have that many doctors, but they've been prepared because Guinea is right next door. So they've known for a while that this was a possibility. They did not close their borders, so the people were still moving back and forth, but they have also now had a situation where they've been watching and been preparing. So we don't know if this particular outbreak is going to get more serious in Mali, but what we do know that is that right now they're prepared, they've handled their one case. It may be like Senegal that had the one case, and that's that, but we don't know for sure yet. What's happening now is that people are beginning to freak out.
Yeah, and it's easy to see why they would. Any news on how this little girl is doing?
She died.
She did pass away.
Yes,
I wasn't sure about
died.
that. That
yes,
is very unfortunate and not surprising.
She died. But the grandmother is in quarantine. The parents died of Ebola, so they were thinking that the grandmother probably will test positive for it because she's the one who carried her 600 miles.
And what's so unfortunate, whether it's Mali or any of the other more affected countries, whether Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, is the stigma, even for those who survive. Other family members of those who have contracted Ebola, there is a very strong stigma.
It's, it's a very, very sad state right now, because if you have survived Ebola, and there have been many people who have survived Ebola, it's very, very difficult for people to interact with them the same way, And this stigma, unfortunately, has gone around the world. So now we're seeing stigma in places where people just have a nationality and don't have the virus, So young people now are going on a campaign and saying, I'm Sierra Leonean, I'm Liberian, but I'm not a virus. It's okay to talk to me. It's okay to chat with me. But the only thing that one can do right now is to say, this is a virus. We're going to deal with it medically, and it's all right to touch people who have been cured of Ebola. One of the great things that happened last week was President Obama hugging Nina Pham once she was discharged from the hospital with Ebola, showing that you can touch people with Ebola.
Yeah, I'm sure that was done on purpose, because there is even in the United States a stigma. There's a student who was denied entry to school because...
and he didn't even have Ebola.
And he didn't even have Ebola, but he was Liberian. So, yeah, that is unfortunate. A lot of education needed for that. Let's turn to the next subject, and that is Pat Robertson, who has in times past said things controversial, has riled Kenyans. What happened?
This is really, his show, The 700 Club, is so popular in East Africa, so popular in Kenya, and they watch everything that he says. So last week, somebody called in and said, I'm thinking about going on a mission to Kenya, but I'm concerned about Ebola with all the stuff that is happening. And Pat Robertson quite rightly said to him, it's so far away from there, it's not even in the same region, you can't get Ebola, go to Kenya. But be careful, you could get AIDS there. You get AIDS from touching a towel. Now, on the one hand, you want to say, you should know better. You've been around a long time.
That's my favorite saying. Should have known better.
You know?
Really should have known better.
But, you know, CBN, which is his network, took the clip down and they said he misspoke. They still have not apologized to the Kenyan people. So all of his fans and people who watch that show regularly in Kenya are saying, look, you have to apologize for this because, one, it's factually incorrect. You cannot get AIDS from touching cloth. You cannot get AIDS from touching a person. You can only get it through intimate bodily fluids, much like Ebola. And right now, people who are friends and fans of his are really, really disappointed that he hasn't taken to the airwaves to not only apologize for that, but to correct the record, because Kenya really needs their tourism. They really need people to come in for whatever reason, whether it's missionary or it's to come in and work. They're looking for their friends to come and visit them. And to be told, oh, by the way, you could get AIDS by touching a towel. That does not sit well with a lot of
considering how
people.
popular he is, you think it would be in his best interest to come out and at least make the correction, if not the apology. You know?
Well, I saw the clip and he spoke with authority, like he knew what he was talking about. He didn't. It was very, very self-assured, you know, Debbie. It was like, oh yeah, just don't touch any towels when you're there.
Yeah.
So I don't think he misspoke. I just think he just doesn't know.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. Now to a much lighter note,
Yes.
literacy being promoted in South Sudan. Tell us
In
about
Juba,
that.
you know, there is a bookshop in Juba. It's a small bookshop. It's called the Leaves Bookshop. But that is a place where it is one of the only places where you can get books that are not textbooks. Right now in South Sudan, if you go to buy a book, you're probably going to study for a test, or you're buying a religious book, maybe a version of the Quran or some sort of religious book. But this bookshop has opened called the Leaves, which is taken as model that, you know, if people can read, they can have open discussion and it builds society. 16% of women in South Sudan cannot read. So what they're trying to do is having not just books that are nonfiction and biographies available, but having a forum where people can come, read books, discuss, almost like a library. If you don't have the money to buy the book, you can sit down and read and go away. And so it has now become the center of activity in Juba. Everyone who wants to do something goes to the Leaves Bookshop. It's a small bookshop, but it is going to be the foundation of trying to change a reading culture, trying to create a reading culture for pleasure, but also a forum for open discussion. As we know, Salva Kiir has sort of like tried to clamp down and say to people, you cannot discuss political things and forums, but that has not stopped the Leaves Bookstore from having occasions where they say, let's come in and discuss our country's future. And by the way, let's look at a few books about government and federalism and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's very encouraging coming out of South Sudan, and they've had a hard time in this last year.
The next thing they have to do is to open a coffee shop in there.
There you go.
Like
It's
a
coming.
proper bookshop.
It's coming. Frankie Edozien, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank
See
you,
you again
Debbie.
next week.
All righty.
That's going to do it for us today. Again, welcome to our SSN TV viewers. Come right on back here tomorrow, same time. This is Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.